Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday afternoon. Hope yours is going well. We've got another Seahawks video to get to today, but first we just hit 3,310 subscribers to the YouTube channel. I want to give a shout out to all the subscribers, and special tip of the cap goes to the channel members, especially elite channel members Brendon, Mikel, Hasher for MVP, VGK Tiger 75, Ryguy, Salacious Crumb, Brendan Nelson's Haircut, TlVlO, ItsHoof, The Reno, 12th Man, Austin Roberts, Scott Todd, and PH Glass. One day, guys. One day. Basically 24 hours. By the time you see this video, we're going to be 24 to 25 hours away from the draft. And definitely plan to come watch it with me if that's what you like to do. I will be streaming everything. We will be covering everything. We're going to have a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to it. But I want to do one more bit of pre-draft content before we get there. So in this video, I'm going to be covering something that I usually don't cover on this channel. Because earlier today, I went and I did something that I don't usually do. I watched a Pete Carroll and John Schneider press conference. It was the press conference earlier today. It was on YouTube. And basically, they just discussed some things right before the draft starts. I think a lot. If you're watching this video, there's a good chance you watched this video too, or you read a recap of it. But I thought I'd go ahead and make a video discussing what I saw these two say in this video and what I took from it, if anything. Now, before I get into what I heard them say and how I interpret it, I want to say one thing. You have to take these kinds of things with a grain of salt, because a lot of the things that get said in these press conferences are pretty obvious, and of the things that aren't obvious, a lot of them don't really mean anything. And before it sounds like I'm just bashing these guys because I don't like them, that's not what's going on here. That's a good thing. You don't want your coach and your GM to publicly give away what they're thinking and what they want to do. Because if they put it in terms that we as fans can understand, that means they're putting it in terms that other teams can understand, and that's not a good place to be. So, what I'm about to get into here, it's definitely going to be things that we have to put a lot of caveats around, because they may say one thing, but their intentions may be something else. But that's not a bad thing. And we're going to try to get something out of this press conference regardless. So with that in mind, I watched the whole hour basically, and here's what I came away with. Okay, so to start the press conference, Carroll implied one thing when he was talking about some of the recent additions to the team that caught my eye. He implied that the work on the pass rush this offseason is not done. He basically implied that despite all the work done on the pass rush so far this offseason, the Seahawks are not done adding to it yet. So there's some implication that they're going to bring in more players on the pass rush, be it in the draft or free agency. Now, I'm never going to complain about adding to the pass rush, but I do find it interesting that after all the time and resources we put into adding to our defensive line, plus the fact that we're now getting Darrell Taylor back after he basically redshirted last year, or literally redshirted last year. That's kind of interesting. I'm curious to see if that manifests itself in the next couple of weeks, and we do actually go get another defensive lineman. So that definitely caught my eye. The next thing that happened was that Carroll got a question about DJ Reed and whether or not DJ Reed's success as an outside cornerback changed Carroll's stance on what attributes he looks for in a cornerback. And Carroll basically dodged the question. He basically said, yeah, DJ Reed played great for us. We were really excited to have him. But he gave no indication whether or not he viewed that as a sign that he needed to stop overvaluing longer, taller, bigger cornerbacks. So he kind of just dodged the question there. He also avoided getting into specifics on the Schottenheimer firing. Somebody asked him about what was the difference in philosophy between Carroll and Schottenheimer that led to Schottenheimer getting fired. And he basically said no comment other than just saying that he wants to make sure the team keeps growing, but didn't really offer any specifics, which, duh, I mean, he probably shouldn't be insulting a guy after he's already left, so that's fine. And then the press conference got into a lot of discussion of Russell Wilson and the trade rumors of this offseason. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about it because it's a subject that kept coming back up as this press conference went on. But I would be amiss to not mention a few things that were said about the Wilson situation. So let's run through it. I'm kind of over this because it didn't happen and it's not going to happen now. But regardless, Carroll insisted that the Russell Wilson drama this offseason was overblown, his frustrations were shared by the organization, and that the team never had any real friction with him or that the relationship was ever damaged. Now, Carroll would say this no matter what. If there was actual friction between Wilson and Carroll, and it was something that almost resulted in a trade but didn't, he wouldn't come out and admit, oh yeah, we were almost done with each other. We wanted to trade him so badly and it just didn't happen. Of course you wouldn't say that. But what Carroll said was a pretty convincing vote of confidence in Wilson and his future with the Seahawks. Also went on to say that he believes Wilson is in tremendous shape, which is an interesting use of a word, and is doing everything he needs to have a great 2021 season. Of course, again, we're getting into the territory where, of course, Carroll's not going to say anything bad about his franchise QB now that we've made a commitment to him. Schneider added that while many teams called about Russell Wilson, they never negotiated with anybody about trading him. So basically, he's saying that, yeah, teams asked about Wilson, but we never opened up the trade talks with anybody. So it seems like some of the stuff, if you take Schneider at his word, it seems like some of the stuff that was discussed about Wilson this offseason was indeed overblown. So I don't know if you can take them at their word, but they seem to be pretty adamant that there was never any consideration of trading Wilson whatsoever. Carroll added that trading Wilson was never a consideration and he should be the QB here for many years to come. Now, again, this is something that Carroll can say that can easily change. If Wilson has a bad year next year, if he pulls a Carson Wentz on us, it's hard for me to believe the team wouldn't strongly consider moving on from him next offseason. But there did seem to be a pretty strong vote of confidence in Wilson continuing to be the guy for the foreseeable future. So as of right now, I don't see any reason to believe we're going to trade him next offseason or the offseason after that, which is another reason why I'd like to get that restructure done so we can get a couple more players in here. The most that Carroll would say about Wilson, and I'll get into this a little more later, but he basically said that Wilson needed to understand how what he said would be interpreted a little bit better than he did. So that was a little interesting. Carroll went on to insist that the media was driving the Wilson trade rumors and that, quote-unquote, he knew the truth. Acknowledges that Wilson, may have needed to control what he said a little bit better and understand how it would be taken. So basically saying that I heard the media talking about the Wilson trade and I didn't care. I didn't have anything to say about it because I knew it was never going to happen. I'm in the building. I have John Schneider's ear. We listen to each other, and I knew Wilson was never going to get traded under any circumstance, so I didn't care to comment on it. I didn't care to worry about it because I knew it wasn't a real thing. He did acknowledge that when Wilson says something like, I'm frustrated, he needs to understand how the media is going to take that, but he did not feel like Wilson broke rule number 1, which is protect the team. He did not feel like Wilson had done anything basically unfaithful to the organization. So he also went on to say that Carroll went on to say that Wilson does not have any more input in personnel decisions than he did before, and that he did not ask for more say in personnel decisions. So that's another thing that's interesting, if true. And if that is the case, then a lot of the offseason drama that we had seemed really unnecessary. And finally, Schneider and Carroll were vague about the list of teams that Wilson produced that he would have been willing to be traded to, and insist that it meant very little. Now, this kind of smells a little fishy to me. The fact that Wilson did produce a list and they're just kind of, I wouldn't say they dodged the question, but they basically said that didn't mean anything. That's hard for me to believe. So I will admit that that smelled a little fishy. But basically, the overall sentiment on the Wilson situation was it was a big nothing burger. Okay. At this point, the press conference started going into other topics. They discussed Jamal Adams. Schneider said that Jamal Adams is part of long-term plans and team is very excited to have him. Once again, of course, they're going to say that until the day they trade him. I want to remind everybody that this team did give Brian Schottenheimer a vote of confidence. Brian Schottenheimer a vote of confidence, and then the next day they fired him. So things happened quickly, but he did indicate that there is no interest in trading Jamal Adams. There's no interest in not making him a part of the defense for the next 5+ years. However, he had nothing to say on whether or not Jamal Adams is willing to play on his 5th-year option. He did not indicate whether or not an extension would be imminent. He did not say anything about will Jamal Adams play out the final year of his deal and be willing to risk that. He just said we haven't had that conversation yet, so worth keeping an eye on. They next addressed the Aldon Smith situation, and Schneider had nothing to say on that other than the legal process must play out. He also briefly spoke about Aldon Smith's prior run-ins with the law. Didn't really say anything new or meaningful, but he did mention that we just need to let the legal process play out, which is fair enough. Schneider went on to admit that the unique nature of this college football season and the draft class motivated the team to try to trade many of their draft picks for veteran players, and he thought that this year's draft was hazy because of the shortened season, because a lot of the players went back to college because they didn't get to play very much, if at all, last year, and generally just felt like this class was weaker than the average class because of the weird season we just had. So it does seem like he was also buying into the narrative that a lot of Seahawks fans were suggesting, that the team should trade as many draft picks as possible for proven veterans because this draft class is so unpredictable. Carroll added that this team does not have many needs going into this draft, and having a first-round pick this year that actually played with the team last year is very valuable. Basically, he thinks that having spending that first-round pick on Jamal Adams, who was playing on the team last year, is more valuable than getting a rookie this year who needs to be integrated on the team. He also said, and this was one of the most interesting things that he said, was that the team does not have many needs going into this draft. Now, when a team feels like they don't really have needs going into a draft, that liberates them to take BPA, best player available. So maybe this is an indication that Carroll and Schneider are going to go into the draft tomorrow and try to take BPA at their picks. But while I like that, I think the best teams typically take BPA, and I like the idea of taking BPA, I do want to kind of stress BPA is subjective, and every GM is going to have a different take on who the best player available is. Last year, we took Jordan Brooks with a 27th pick. Maybe we genuinely thought that Jordan Brooks was the best player available at that slot. I don't think any other GM would have, but maybe we did. So BPA doesn't necessarily mean everything either, but something to watch for. All right. Carroll then moved on to Shane Waldron. He says that Waldron has jumped right in to start influencing the players and starting to affect the changes that he wants to bring into 2021. He also added that the offense will continue to carry over some of the Schottenheimer plays and Schottenheimer schemes as Waldron blends his offense in, which is the same thing that was done when Schottenheimer was brought in to replace Bevel in 2018. Nothing too surprising there. The offense was still really good last year. I know it fell off as the season went on, but the offense was really good last year. It set a franchise record for points. They did a lot of things well. They just didn't do the right things well when the season got down to the most important games, unfortunately. So if you want to keep some of the Schottenheimer influence around, that's fine. I mean, Wilson has a wonderful deep ball, and you don't want to get away from the deep ball, and Schottenheimer was good at letting him use that a lot. Players like DK Metcalf are great at running go routes and just outrunning the secondary to the ball. You don't want to get away from that. So I think that's a reasonable thing to say. And I think it's reasonable to say that one off season is not enough time to implement your entire offensive scheme. He also adds that Waldron's biggest impact on improving pass protection will be the rhythm of the passes. Many people, myself included, have noted that the improvements made this offseason to the offensive line have been minimal so far. We've upgraded from Mike Upati to Gabe Jackson, and that's about it. Some people are saying that's not good enough. So Carroll seems to be kind of indicating that Waldron will make a big impact on improving the pass protection by improving the rhythm of the passing game, which I like, and that's something that I'm really looking forward to. Basically, he went on to say that we're going to try to get the ball out of Wilson's hands very quickly. We're going to try to, have a lot of three-step drops and quick passes and short passes, which I think everybody kind of expects. So I think that's good news. I think most people are going to be pretty happy about that. Schneider then decided to comment on KJ Wright, or he was actually asked about KJ Wright. He said that the team has had communications with KJ Wright and that they are surprised he is still available given how many former Seahawks coaches are spread around the league. He lauded praises on KJ Wright and said, given that there are so many former Seahawks coaches spread around the league, we thought that one of them would want to bring him in because they know how positive of an influence he is in a locker room and how good of a player he is and can still be. Carroll went on to say that the door is not closed on signing KJ Wright, which I think is just a politically correct way of saying the team is not very interested. He didn't say the team is really excited to continue negotiating with KJ Wright. He just said the door is not yet closed. I don't know where KJ Wright would fit in on this team right now, really. It seems like we're moving on without him, and we're doing a pretty good job of it. So I don't take this as an endorsement of us bringing back KJ Wright. I take it as just trying to keep all possibilities open. But I didn't get a big indication that we were going to bring back KJ. But we said all the politically correct things. Schneider then mentioned a little bit about how excited he is to be back here when they asked him about his extension with the Seahawks. Typical stuff, just saying, I love it here, my wife loves it here, blah, blah, blah. Nothing too exciting to us. Excuse me. He was next asked about the void years that he put in a lot of his contracts this offseason on players like Ethan Posick, Gabe Jackson, Chris Carson, Kerry Hyder, Benson Mayowa. They asked him, why are you doing that this offseason when you've never done it before? And Schneider says exactly what we would expect him to say, that this is a unique year, it is unique times, and it required using void years in contracts this offseason for the first time ever, acknowledges that there is a danger in doing it, and they would have preferred to not do it, which every GM in the league should feel that same way, but he believed that because of the unique nature of this offseason, we needed to do it, which I completely agree with, so I liked hearing that. He also said one more thing that I think every Seahawks fan should take note of, which is we don't know what teams are going to have to do on June 1st in terms of cap casualties. Basically saying that a lot of players who are thought of as very good and very valuable are going to get cut, and that this team, he basically implied that the team needed to be ready for what might happen around June 1st. So my interpretation of that is some good players are going to shake free, and we need to make sure we have enough cap room to sign a couple of them when they shake free. So let's say the Saints. I'm just going to give one example. Last year, the Saints had to make a big cap casualty cut. I think it was Larry Warford. They had to cut him. He was a 3-time Pro Bowler. They just, bye-bye. And you're going to see a lot of Larry Warfords this June. Or, well, actually, I guess you would say May. So he's basically saying we want to make sure we have enough cap room to sign some of those guys if they shake free. So the free agency party does not end just because we're deep into the free agency period. There's going to be another wave around June 1st. And he basically implied, I want to make sure we can afford to get involved in that. Carroll then commented that Ethan Posick will be battling for the starting job with Kyle Fuller, which, okay, I like the idea of allowing everybody to compete for every starting job. You know, that always compete mantra. You're not going to grandfather clause somebody into their starting job. I think that's probably a decent thing to say. I think it's a little silly to say it for somebody as lackluster as Kyle Fuller, but he did say that Posick will be battling for the starting job with Fuller. Some people were saying that implies we're not going to add another center. I don't agree with that. I think that's just something you say for now. And then if you have the opportunity to add a good center in the draft or free agency, you do it anyway. He also spent some time lauding praises on the players who were retained, acquired, or extended in the offseason. He mentioned one thing in that speech he gave, which most of it was not all that interesting to me, but he did mention that Benson Mayowa can play a little outside linebacker, which made me kind of think, oh, are we going to do that? So keep an eye on that possibility going forward, because there's a log jam at Leo, so you might see Benson Mayowa taking some snaps at outside backer. He also said that Cedric Ogbuehi will get a chance to start in 2021 and feels like he has a great upside. I'm just going to chalk that up to him being a little overly positive and trying to push the always compete mantra. And I don't have a problem with it. I find it to be a little silly to suggest that Cedric Ogbuehi can take Brandon Shell's job, but sure, I don't have a problem with Carroll saying it, I guess. The next question revolved around the team only having 3 players still on the team from the 2016 and 2017 draft classes. I've spent a lot of time in recent weeks in this space talking about how bad recent draft classes have been, and the 2016 and 2017 draft classes are pretty good examples of that. And Schneider basically said, we're trying to build the team in the way that we see it needing to come together, and sometimes that just doesn't involve the players that you drafted. Sometimes you just have to let those players go. In most cases, it's because they just weren't part of the team's plans going forward. In a couple cases, it was because they got too much money, like Shaquille Griffin. But he kind of gave a vague non-answer, just saying like, hey, that's just what happened. We didn't keep a lot of the players we drafted those 2 years. And then Carroll added that the team will not keep a draft-picked player just to save face, and that a lesser drafted player who performs better can often take a role from a higher drafted player, which, okay, that's understandable. That's totally fine. That's a little bit of a tautology, but okay, valid point. One thing Carroll said that kind of caught my attention right after that was that last year he felt like new players did not get the best opportunity to compete for playing time because there was no offseason or preseason. And he really tried to keep things as constant as possible with who he designated as the starter. Like, one thing he said he did that he kind of wished he didn't have to do was he just gave Brandon Shell the starting job instead of letting Cedric Ogbuehi compete for it, because he felt like, well, I signed Shell to be the starter and I want to keep that consistent this season. I want to give him an opportunity to really learn how to play with these guys because he's new. I don't want to be pulling the rope back and forth on these 2 guys. I want to just pick a starter and stick with him. And he basically implied that this offseason is going to be different. He's going to give players more of an opportunity to compete now because we actually have an offseason. I find it interesting that we actually had a lot of good contributions from rookies last year despite this. I mean, Freddie Swain made a little bit of a contribution. Alton Robinson did a lot of nice stuff. Jordan Brooks got on the field. Damian Lewis was obviously incredible. Darrell Taylor couldn't be helped, unfortunately, there. I'm sure he would have gotten on the field if he was healthy. The only rookie that we drafted last year who didn't really get on the field was Colby Parkinson. So I find it kind of interesting that the rookies still had that big of an impact, despite Carroll kind of admitting that he just felt like he couldn't afford to invest the time and the resources into allowing players to compete for starting jobs. All right, to wrap up the press conference, Schneider said that whether or not the team trades down will depend on how the draft goes and how other teams view the draft as the process goes on and how much it deviates from expected paths. Basically saying everybody has a decent idea of how the first round is going to go. It's going to mostly follow expected patterns. And then once you get into the later parts of the second round, you just don't know what's going to happen. And there's a chance that it goes in a completely different direction than a lot of people were expecting. So I don't know if he's saying anything too meaningful here, but Schneider, what he basically said was, we don't know exactly how this draft is going to go, and how it goes is going to influence whether or not we actually trade back. They seem to be poking fun at the concept of the Seahawks always trading down every opportunity they get. And I think Carroll at the end of Schneider's comment even said, so you're saying there's a chance, which it seems to imply that, hey, there's a chance we might not trade down, even though I know everyone in the world thinks that we will. So that was notable, I suppose. Schneider went on to comment on the Jarran Reed situation. He said it was disappointing and that he wished that Jarran Reed would have worked with the team, but it didn't happen. Kind of little maybe barbed comment, I thought. I don't know, but it seemed to have a little bit of teeth to it. I could be reading too much into stuff. I don't know. Also commented that Darrell Taylor looks great and is ready to get going. Basically saying he should be ready to play week 1. Carroll expects Taylor to be full go, and he is in the building every day. So both guys seem to think that Taylor is going to have a full year of contributions this year. So that's exciting. And the final thing that Carroll said in this conference was he talked a little bit about bringing back QB coach Carl Smith, praised him up and down, said he has a tremendous background and great experience, and that he and Carl Smith have worked together for a long, long time, and he's thrilled to have him back on. And that's pretty much all I can say about this press conference. A few things were said that I thought were interesting and worth talking about. So if you guys watched the press conference, let me know what you took away from it, if anything. Let me know what you think about my thoughts on the press conference. Basically, long story short, Wilson's not going anywhere. Jamal Adams is not going anywhere. If anybody was thinking that was a possibility, I think it's time to take that off the board. They said a couple other things that I found to be illuminating. For the most part, it was a lot of coach speak and GM speak, which is not bad. But I thought I'd go ahead and do something I don't usually do and actually watch one of these things. I usually don't like to watch these things, I gotta be honest. But it was interesting. So next time I see you guys in a video, it will be draft day. So excited. Hope you guys are ready to come out for it. See y'all later. Peace out, go Hawks.